this year from a tractor trailer that had picked up the coins from the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia. The truck driver was bound for Miami when he pulled into a parking lot to sleep for a bit. During the night, thieves made off with a portion of its cargo of $750,000 in dimes, a shipment that weighed about 6 tons. Thousands of coins were left scattered all over the lot in Northeast Philadelphia. The indictment, unsealed Friday, alleges that after the theft, thousands of dimes were converted into cash at coin machines in Maryland or through deposits to at least 4 different suburban Philadelphia banks. 4 Philadelphia men, 25-year-old Rakeem Savage, 31-year-old Ronald Bird, 30-year-old Hanif Palmer, and 32-year-old Malik Palmer, face conspiracy, robbery, theft of government money, among other charges. Authorities in Oregon identified the man as 44-year-old Joseph David Emerson. He was being held Monday on 83 counts each of attempted murder and reckless endangerment and 1 count of endangering an aircraft. Sunday's incident occurred on a Horizon Air Embraer 175 carrying 80 passengers, including young children, and 4 crew members. The airline said in a statement that the captain and co-pilot quickly responded. Engine power was not lost, and the crew secured the aircraft without incident. Seattle-based Alaska Airlines, which owns Horizon, said no weapons were involved. One of the pilots told air traffic controllers that the man who posed the threat had been removed from the cockpit and was in handcuffs in the back of the plane. The FBI office in Portland said that it is investigating. And then another weird incident on a plane. Passengers on another plane got quite a scare when a JetBlue plane tipped backward as passengers were trying to exit the plane at JFK International Airport in New York. The plane, which had just arrived from Barbados, apparently had a weight shift in the cargo area as it was being unloaded. The shift caused the tail to abruptly drop down and the nose to dramatically tilt up. While some passengers had already exited the plane, others who were still trying to deplane were left screaming and scrambling to grab onto seats as they stood in the aisle. One passenger describing the event as feeling like the plane was about to do a backflip. Fortunately, no one was actually trying to step out of the plane at the moment the shift happened. A witness describes both the plane and the boarding bridge as damaged. JetBlue has taken the aircraft out of service until it can be inspected. No injuries were reported. Years ago, Vandersloot pleaded guilty Wednesday to federal charges of attempting to extort money from Holloway's mother back in 2010. He was doing it in exchange for information about the location of her daughter's body. As part of his plea deal, Vandersloot said he bludgeoned her to death on a beach after she resisted his sexual advances, and then he put her body in the ocean. It's unclear what Aruban authorities will do with the information. An attorney for Holloway's father said last week that it was his understanding, based on conversations with authorities, that the statute of limitations for murder has expired in Aruba. All right, this is an odd
story of international peace and freedom, democracy, human rights around the world. And of course, that costs a lot of money, and unfortunately, taxpayers are having to pay that. But in the long run, we do need to find new sources of revenue to provide global security as we have been. But it's also for our benefit that we don't allow these dictators to get bigger and more powerful. If they take Taiwan, if they take Israel, if they take Ukraine, they become more powerful. And in the future, 10, 20 years down the road, they can use that additional territory and power against us.
And now McConnell went on to note it's an emergency for the U.S. to step up and deal with this axis of evil. Is our current policy towards these countries strong enough?
It's a good question. I think that we need to definitely increase our economic sanctions on countries like Russia and China and Iran. We should stop negotiating for hostages. I mean, we just basically gave Iran billions of dollars for just a couple of hostages. We've relieved Venezuela of the oil embargo there, again, for just a few hostages. We can't keep funding these countries, including through the IMF, World Bank, most favored nation status for China in terms of trade with the United States. We just can't keep doing that and expect them to respect our values when they're trampling all over them, and we just keep handing them money. It just doesn't make sense.
Then how does the U.S. step up, as McConnell says?
I think that what McConnell's looking for, of course, is increased funding for the Ukraine war and for Israel, and they're trying to combine those two into a single bill to force everyone to vote yes on them, whereas some of the Republicans, led by people like Matt Gaetz in the House, do not want to pay for Ukraine, but do want to pay for Israel. So I think that's the basis of the conflict right now in Washington. Yes, we should be supporting all of these democracies, but at the same time, we need to be careful about our debt. The interest payments alone are getting unsustainable, unfortunately.
And as you mentioned, China, so zooming out a bit, the Philippines is summoning the Chinese ambassador. That's after a near collision over the weekend in the South China Sea between a Chinese Coast Guard and two Philippine military vessels. What is
concrete to build miles and miles of underground tunnels. They use those tunnels to ferry rockets and fighters. They call it the Gaza Metro. That's how extensive it is. Another example is that the international community, the U.S., the EU, the UN, has sent piping and other means to build, for Gaza to build its own water system. And Hamas appropriated that piping. They were very proud of it. They made a video of it. They appropriated it to build missile tubes. So this is an example of how these supplies are appropriated. It's nearly impossible to get it to the average citizen on the ground.
Adam, all of it. That is just a striking revelation here. The IDF has even said that a recent shipment here has been stolen, and that's enough fuel to power the water desalination plant facilities in Gaza for 6 days. I want to talk about the refugee situation briefly here. Egypt and Jordan have refused to allow Palestinian refugees into their countries, and some experts say that's due to the high cost. They don't want to be seen as being complicit in the displacement of Palestinians, and the fear that Hamas terrorists might enter their country. Is there more to this equation?
Well, all of those points are correct, but let's just put it simply. They are refusing to take refugees for self-preservation. The Jordanian regime back in the 70s was nearly toppled by Palestinian terrorists, at that time under Yasser Arafat, not under Hamas, but nearly toppled the regime. Tens of thousands of Palestinians were killed by the Jordanian regime, and they were pushed out into Lebanon. And then that destabilized Lebanon and was a big cause for their civil war. Meanwhile, in Egypt, just as recently as 10 years ago, they had a Muslim Brotherhood regime take power. Hamas is also sprung from the Muslim Brotherhood, so they are ideological cousins. Now, not only if the Palestinians were pushed into the Sinai, which is already sort of a wild west within Egypt that has al-Qaeda presence and other Islamist presence, Hamas would have a new base there, and it would inspire Egypt's domestic Muslim Brotherhood organizations to perhaps rise up again and try to overthrow their current government.
Just briefly here, what's the best move for Gazans now, given that even some of them support Hamas leadership? Do they have any alternatives?
Unfortunately, they don't. There was the elections, the only elections that happened in 2005, in which Hamas defeated the relatively moderate Palestinian Authority. Then in 2006, Hamas violently purged out the Palestinian Authority out of that territory. And now Hamas has a monopoly on the guns and on violence, which gives them absolute control. No, I would not want to be a Palestinian, and there is no real democratic or other peaceful means to overthrow the Hamas government.
Turning to the West Bank here, do you anticipate that this conflict is going to widen? We've already seen Israeli airstrikes on terror targets near a mosque there, and causing Palestinians to have to move towards Jordan there, putting pressure on them to accept them?
Well, all of these situations are bad, but let's say the West Bank is a little bit better because Israel has maintained some security presence there. Now, the Palestinians there in cities, towns, and other enclaves actually control their day-to-day governance, but Israel has a presence, for example, on the Jordan Valley and other strategic points. And because of that, in the West Bank, they haven't been able to import missiles and other weapons from Iran and other regional actors. And so Israel has more of a handle on that situation. Therefore, I don't think it's going to break into total war in the way it is in Gaza. And I don't think there will be the same kind of refugee crisis. And again, Jordan has absolutely no interest for its own self-preservation to let any refugees in on that border.
Well, it is great hearing your update.
People gathered to show solidarity with Israel. A group of about 200 pro-Palestinian protesters staged their own rally nearby. Witnesses say a man drove his car, which was covered in Israeli flags, into the group before getting out and firing a shot into the air. Police took him into custody. Then a man draped in an Israeli flag emerged from the hall and pepper sprayed the crowd. He, too, was taken into custody. No injuries were reported, but several demonstrators were hit with pepper spray along with a police officer and a reporter. There is no word yet on whether the two men will be charged. And investigators have identified several people of interest in the fatal stabbing of a Detroit synagogue leader, but no one has publicly been declared a prime suspect. Police declined to disclose Samantha Wool's connection to any of the people of interest. The 40-year-old was the president of Isaac Agri downtown synagogue in Detroit. She had attended a wedding Friday night and left the event around 12:30 a.m. Saturday. She was stabbed inside her home not long after and managed to make her way outside, where she collapsed and died. Police emphasize again that Wool's death does not appear to be the result of anti-Semitism. The FBI and the Michigan State Police are both assisting in the case. About 1,000 people attended her funeral Sunday at Hebrew Memorial Chapel in Oak Park, Michigan.